Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome back to Barsetshire Week. Today I'm going to be talking about the fourth book in Antony Trollope's Barsetshire Chronicles, and that is Framley Parsonage. Chapter 1. When young Mark Roberts was leaving college, his father might well declare that all men began to say all good things to him, and to extol his fortune in that he had a son blessed with so excellent a disposition. Framley Parsonage is one of my favourites in the series, and I think a really interesting novel. As I have done with the rest of this video series, I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about the plot and premise, then talk about the things that I love about it. Don't think I have many things to say that I don't like about it, because it is a really great book. Partly because Dr. Thorne gets such a good hype. A lot of people read the first three books in the Barsetshire series and don't continue, but you really ought. Framley Parsonage is such a brilliant book and one of my favourites, and yeah, the last three in the series are three excellent, brilliant books. Framley Parsonage takes as its hero a young man called Mark Roberts. I think he's in his late 20s, he's married, he has a few young children, which to begin with is quite rare for a hero of a Victorian novel, which makes me happy, and he also has a sister, Lucy Roberts, who comes to live with him towards the beginning of the book. Mark Roberts is a clergyman. He lives in Framley Parsonage, which is very nearby a great house in which resides a elderly woman called Lady Lufton and her son, Lord Lufton, who is a great old friend of Mark's. Now, Mark is a clergyman, and on the one hand he wants to be a good man and a good clergyman and a good husband, and on the other hand Mark really wants to be in society and to be liked by people. And through Mark's efforts to be liked by people and to get into society, he ends up kind of falling in with the wrong crowd and lending money to someone who he shouldn't lend money to, and this leads him into all kinds of difficulties. So that's sort of one plot line in the book, and then the other plot line involves Mark's sister Lucy Roberts and her relationship with Lord Lufton, the young gentleman of the manor, who is really taken with Lucy despite the intense disapproval of his mother, who feels that Lucy is not of high birth or high fortune enough to marry Lord Lufton. The Lucy Roberts Lord Lufton plotline is fairly similar in a way to the main central romance plot of Dr. Thorne, the third book in the series, but I think it's better in Framley Parsonage. I think it's sort of more developed and more complicated and really interesting. And then aside from the sort of two main plots, there is also a subplot going on with another vicar who lives nearby, Mr. Crawley, who, unlike Mark Roberts, is not a very successful clergyman, has very little money, he has a few children and a wife, and really struggles to make ends meet, to be respectable, to feed his children, yet he has a much stronger sense of sort of virtue and morality than Mark does. So the juxtaposition between Mark Roberts and Mr. Crawley is quite important, and Mr. Crawley also is one of the central characters of the sixth book in the series as well. So, things I love about Framley Parsonage, there are a lot. One thing I love is just that it is very unconventional. I spoke yesterday about how one of the reasons why I don't love Dr. Thorne as much as the rest of the series is that it is for me a more conventional Victorian novel, whereas Framley Parsonage for me is a much more unconventional Victorian novel. Yes, the plotline between Lucy and Lord Lufton is maybe a little bit more conventional, but Mark's plotline is really interesting and very different, I think, and really examines one of the core themes of this series, which is what does it mean to be a clergyman, and what does it mean to your humanity to be a clergyman? Are you to be held to superhuman standards of morality because you have chosen this particular, what is effectively in Victorian society a profession? Must you be more moral? And what if you're not? So many of the books in this series are about morality in a way, and that theme of morality and of the position of a clergyman and the sort of moral duties it requires is really fascinatingly dealt with here. I also like Mark's relationship with his wife, and it's nice to have a hero of a story who is married already, because that isn't that common in Victorian literature. I also really like the way that the book looks at sort of class and social status and the difficulties of income, and the way that it examines kind of the conflict between financial security and moral security, which is especially exemplified in the differences between Mark Roberts and Mr. Crawley. And similarly, we get these kind of complicated class boundaries in that Mark Roberts feels himself in many ways an equal to Lord Lufton. They're good friends, and yet his sister is not considered an equal in terms of marriage, because friendship is very different to marriage, and because Lord Lufton is so highborn in comparison to the Robertses. I also think Lady Lufton is a really interesting character. I often have a Freudian slip when I'm talking about her and call her Lady Ludlow, which is a character from an Elizabeth Gaskell novella, My Lady Ludlow. I don't think it's partly because their names both begin with that similar sound, but also it's partly because they're kind of similar, and I think they have quite a lot of similar characteristics, in that Lady Lufton, a bit like Lady Ludlow, is one of those characters who you sometimes dislike because her opinions are really conservative and really backward, but you also kind of understand why, and you do have sympathy for her. One of the things I like about the Barsetshire series is that it's set over a period of, I guess, 20 or 30 years from the 1850s to the 1870s, where you really get a sense of a change going on in Victorian society, especially to do with class, where class boundaries are no longer as fixed and as solid as they used to be, and how that affects different characters, especially the older characters who still view class boundaries in a way that their children perhaps don't, and also in the way that parental relationships have changed over the time period, where once a parent might have been more likely to dictate and to push certain marriages on their children, the younger generation in the 1850s and 70s are saying that they want to pick their marriage partners for themselves. And obviously it's more complicated than that, but I do think there is this sense of a kind of social change going on in the second half of the 19th century, which Antony Trollope really interestingly explores in the series and in Framley Parsonage, especially in the relationship Lady Lufton has with her son. I also love Lucy Roberts, and I think one of the reasons why I almost don't like Dr. Thorne even more in retrospect is because Lucy Roberts and Mary Thorne have a lot in common, but I think Lucy Roberts is a much stronger character in many ways, and just an interesting, fascinating character as well. And her sort of relationship with Lady Lufton is something I find really, really interesting. As with so many Antony Trollope books, it is funny, it is engaging, it is moving, it is powerful. Also in A Framley Parsonage, we do have later on in the book quite a lot of characters from both Barsetshire Towers and Dr. Thorne, which draws those two books together, and I very much enjoy the Miss Dunstable plotline that goes on in Framley Parsonage. It pleases me greatly. Great book, and one I would highly recommend, like the entire series. So that's it, I think, for today. Do let me know down in the comments if you've read Framley Parsonage and what you thought of it, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about the 5th book in the series and my favourite, which is The Small House at Ellington.